between Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra. Throughout Shakespeare's love tragedy, Antony and Cleopatra, numerous instances suggest that Antony and Cleopatra's relationship is harmful, toxic, and destructive. The calamitous nature of their relationship resulted in the end of pharaohs of Egypt and the loss of an empire. There was so much at stake for this couple: their children, soldiers, and sovereignties, and their lascivious relationship and poor choices destroyed it all. For these reasons, I assert that Antony and Cleopatra is one of the most destructive couples in all of Shakespeare's works. Let's answer the question, why? Why are relationships in literature, history, and modern day important to analyze? Toxic or abusive relationships can have profound negative effects that influence major aspects of everyday life and have far-reaching effects on their future, even after the relationship has broken off. The education and close analysis of toxic behaviors in relationships is important for individuals to gain awareness, protect their emotional well-being, establish healthy boundaries, ensure their safety, promote personal growth, and foster healthy relationships. It is a crucial step towards creating and maintaining healthy, respectful, and fulfilling relationships in all aspects of their life. But why Antony and Cleopatra? I have chosen these two because they are a couple we are still familiar with centuries after their deaths. Shakespeare has immortalized the couple in his play and creates dialogue for which we can assess with a psychoanalytical lens. Please note, Shakespeare's play does not equal history, and my analysis will be of the play itself, with implications drawn from history. Shakespeare's play begins with Antony and Cleopatra partying in Egypt. They are neglecting their responsibilities in the name of love and lust. Antony bellows that life should be all about pleasure, and in Egypt it surely is so. The scene is interrupted by a messenger from Rome signifying Antony's responsibilities, which he is absolutely ignoring. He nestles himself into Cleopatra's arms and disregards the messenger, which is an omen of foreboding of how the rest of the play will continue. The message turned out to be especially important. Antony's wife is dead, and Caesar believes that Antony was conspiring with her to take over his empire. Antony must leave Cleopatra and make amends with Caesar and his responsibilities. This displeases Cleopatra. It is much harder to manipulate a pawn from a distance. Make no mistake, Antony is her pawn, no matter what affection she harbors for him. Having Rome on her side ensures that Egypt will not be conquered by them. She had a relationship with the previous Caesar to ensure the same, even having a son by him. By this point, she also has 3 children with Mark Antony, but they are hardly even mentioned in the play, almost as if they bear no significance to the lovers. When Antony returns to Rome, he sees what a terrible mess he has left the state of his affairs. His Roman reputation, which is his life, is starting to fray because of the way he has lived his life of leisure with Cleopatra. In a desperate attempt to alleviate the unrest with Caesar, he marries Caesar's sister, Octavia. This creates an alliance between him and Caesar that would be unbreakable if it was honored. However, Antony returns to Cleopatra. The revelry resumes as if he had never left, but this time he does it publicly without any fear of rebuke. Caesar learns of this infidelity to his sister and is rightfully enraged. This absolutely means that their alliance is severed. More so, Caesar will retaliate with blood. As a result of Antony's poor choices, Antony is destroyed in battle, and his lead commander and friend Enobarbus even allies himself with the enemy Caesar. A messenger is sent to Caesar, to Cleopatra from Caesar, and the man makes lusty advances upon her. She considers him, seeing that this may be her salvation from her conquerors. Antony happens upon the scene and is infuriated. Cleopatra flees from him and concocts a plan to make him feel sorry. She tells her servants to inform Antony that she has killed herself because of his mistreatment of her. Antony immediately is heartbroken and takes his own life. Cleopatra is now prisoner of Caesar, but refuses to be paraded as a war trophy in Rome. She takes her life and dies from venomous snakes, a queen atop her throne. So to begin the analyzation of the toxic behaviors in the relationship as portrayed by Caesar, I will break the study into two sections, Cleopatra and then Antony. Cleopatra is an icon of femininity, sexuality, desire, and so much more. Yet it is clear from the beginning that she is intensely jealous and insecure. When Antony leaves her presence, she is terrified he will forget her. Her jealousies of other women is clear with Fulvia, Octavia, and even Iris. Cleopatra does not want Antony to open any letters from home from Fulvia. This could be because of the high stakes she is engaged in, but Shakespeare suggests that her insecurities could be regarding her maturing age and appearance. This is apparent when she inquires of the messenger how Octavia looked and sounded. "Didst thou behold Octavia? Is she as tall as me? Is she shrill-tongued or low?" These lines imply insecurity and mistrust. Finally, she even becomes jealous of her own faithful handmaid. She despises the idea that because Iris died sooner than her, even by minutes, that she may be kissed by Antony in the afterlife. This jealousy seems to discard any empathy she has for her friend's passing. Her jealousy knows no bounds as it even tangles itself with her trusted companions. Cleopatra displays a lack of confidence in her relationship with Antony at the start of the play. She asks Antony, "If it be love, tell me how much." Antony responds, "There's beggary in the love that can be reckoned." This scene suggests that the relationship is insecure, at least on the part of Cleopatra. She's not sure how Antony feels about her or if their love is authentic. This aspect of insecurity by one partner in a relationship is troubling, as described in Psychology Today. Partners who don't trust each other can't feel secure, thus their relationship will cycle through frequent emotional highs and lows because a mistrusting partner spends much of their time scrutinizing their relationship and trying to understand their partner's motives. Additionally, when Antony dies, she cries, "Hast thou no care of me?" This can be interpreted as an insecure cry of selfishness. Did she really wonder whether Antony cared for her, even though he died and ended his life with the belief that she had passed away? This further demonstrates how insecure Cleopatra is about the investment that Antony has with her. All right, in the play, Cleopatra is depicted as very temperamental and a violent woman, and you can see so in these images. When Cleopatra hears of Antony's marriage to Octavia, she goes berserk. She beats the messenger, herself, and anyone she can find. Cleopatra is increasingly unstable as she receives unwelcome news. She abuses those that bring messages of poor tidings and brings truth to the saying, "Don't shoot the messenger." Cleopatra's temper is pretty astonishing. When her servants ask why she sends 20 messengers a day to Antony while he is away, she screams, "He shall every day have a several greeting, or I'll unpeople Egypt." This is a violent threat to make, even about her own citizens, which demonstrates how fiery and irrational Cleopatra's temper is. If a relationship becomes so unhealthy that the individual does not know who they are without their partner, this can signal an unhealthy or even codependent relationship. While Antony is away in Rome, Cleopatra has difficulty being independent. She sends several messengers to learn what he is doing and has difficulty occupying her time. This is particularly evident when she drinks mandragora, a sedating herb, so that she might sleep out this great gap of time my Antony is away. When Antony dies, Iris looks at her queen and recognizes that Cleopatra cannot live without her Antony. She cries, "She's dead too, our sovereign." Later, Cleopatra understands the same. She knows she will not last long without Antony. She tells her servants, "Our lamp is spent." Cleopatra has a reputation for getting whatever she wants, and one of the common ways she does so is through manipulation. Janet Sussman writes of this reputation and manipulation with the understanding that it is not that she does not love Antony, but she loves her throne more. Antony himself recognizes her powerful ability to manipulate when he says, "She is cunning past man's thought." Cleopatra understands the effect she has on men, the power she has over them as well. She brags to her servants about her own abilities to get what she wants when she speaks through the metaphor of fishing, where she successfully catches the men as if they were fish. Even when she has died, Caesar looks upon her face and says, "She looks like sleep, as if she would catch another Antony in her strong toil of grace." Harold Bloom expands on this excerpt by writing, "Toil takes the archaic meaning of net. Her net, referring back to the fishing metaphor, has been strong enough to seduce us and many before and after." When the terrible battle on sea was over and requests for treaties had been denied, Cleopatra realized she was running out of options. Caesar sends her a message to give up Antony and surrender. This would save her life and put her son on the throne. The messenger Caesar sent makes innuendos and smothers Cleopatra's hand with lust-laden kisses. Now, because historically she did conspire with Caesar and betray Antony, it is a fair assumption that her character in the play considers doing so. Sussman echoes this idea. Cleopatra is ready to pack cards with Caesar to ensure her own survival. This infidelity and willingness to betray her partner demonstrates a toxic and destructive relationship. Without trust, a relationship may struggle to thrive, as honesty and integrity are crucial for a strong and healthy bond. Throughout the play, Cleopatra lies to Antony many times. Even Enobarbus has recognized her patterns of pretend when he says, "I have seen her die 20 times upon a far poorer moment." Cleopatra uses lies to manipulate those around her, even for the most meaningless situations. She says, "If you find him sad, say I am dancing. If in mirth, report that I am sudden sick." And with the most grievous, catastrophic, narcissistic lie, she orders, "Go tell him I have slain myself." It is curious that throughout the play, there is not a mention of Cleopatra's children until the very end. Caesar warns Cleopatra that if she kills herself to avoid capture, she puts her children to destruction. There has been no other mention of her children before this moment, no plan in place mentioned for their safety once their kingdom has been conquered. Could it be that she shortchanged the future of her children by neglecting them in her frivolity and selfishness? Truly, after her suicide, Caesar had her eldest son put to death, and he did take her 3 children from Antony to be raised by his sister Octavia, and this is historically accurate, the woman whom Cleopatra was so jealous of. It is essential to remember that everyone has flaws and makes mistakes, and people can change and grow. But Cleopatra has shown a pattern of manipulating and playing powerful and influential dictators. Antony rues that he himself did not see this betrayal coming when her past was so clear to him. When he calls her a triple-turned whore, he is referring to the intentional seduction of Caesar, Pompey, and then Antony, declaring that she was not genuinely invested in the relationships, but used these men for superficial gains. There are many scenes that seem to show Cleopatra has antisocial personality disorder, which is unmistakably challenging to any relationship. Some of these scenes have been mentioned previously, but it is rarely shown with such profoundness as when Antony is suffering from a fatal wound and beginning to die. Harold Bloom writes, furious that Cleopatra is more interested in preparing herself for a great scene than in her supposed suffering. So Cleopatra is playing a dramatic role where she is the star and femme fatale, even though Antony is the one dying here. When she manages to make Antony's death even about herself, Bloom continues. When Antony asks for a final kiss, her melodramatic response again centers upon only her performance. She seems more interested in the indignity of having to face Octavia's demure stare after his death than in the agony of Antony's death throes. This implies that Cleopatra is more concerned about herself than Antony, who is at death's door and in physical agony. Above is an image where the scene is being brought before her. So here's Antony in the death throes being brought to her. She knows that he's dying, and she's very disinterested. She's very nonchalant. And below is a depiction of how Cleopatra demands and devours everyone's attention, which is typical of this disorder. If these scenarios and images have not elucidated what this disorder looks like, the Medloin Encyclopedia defines it well. Antisocial personality disorder is a mental condition in which a person has a long-term pattern of manipulating, exploiting, or violating the rights of others without any remorse. This behavior may cause problems in relationships or at work, and is often criminal. Some doctors believe that psychopathic personality is the same disorder. This is absolutely apparent when Cleopatra tells her servant, "Go tell him I have slain myself." She spares no thought of how this would devastate Antony. She does not consider what consequences this might create. This was simply a tool for manipulation and her own selfishness. Next, to analyze Antony. Now, I'd like to include a trigger warning on the next slide, which has an image depicting violence towards Cleopatra. Please note this image is choreographed carefully by consenting performers. The first attribute I'd like to analyze is that the relationship between the pair is highly sexual and violent. This attribute in a relationship can be dangerous for any involved. Both characters have demonstrated violence when triggered. Additionally, when a relationship's merit or enjoyment is largely based upon sex, it lacks depth and real intimacy, resulting in a shallow relationship. Antony demonstrates their lascivious relationship when he says, "There's not a minute of our lives that should not have pleasure." It is also reflected in Caesar's irritated lines. He fishes, drinks, and wastes the lamps of light in revel. Enobarbus, Antony's closest friend, admits that Antony has made his lust lord over his reason, which is to blame for all the disasters in the play. Antony is incredibly jealous and retaliates to these threats with verbal abuse. There is so much to unpack in these words, he says, but to name just a few, he jibes to Cleopatra, "I found you as a morsel," persuading her to believe that she was nothing before he came along. He suggests that she is a whore who does not know what discretion or constraint is in regards to men and her sexuality. This is an attempt to make Cleopatra feel shame for the contact with Phidias, as well as her past relationships. This is unusual behavior for Antony so far in the play, but this verbally abusive outburst suggests that this belief has been brewing beneath the surface. Antony exposes that not only is he jealous of Phidias, but every relationship Cleopatra has had, and is holding that against her. Lying or cheating in a relationship can significantly decrease the chances of the relationship succeeding long term. Trust is a fundamental pillar of a healthy relationship. Not only is Antony unfaithful with Cleopatra, but he is also unfaithful to Cleopatra. When Antony returns to Rome and an alliance of marriage is deferred on the grounds that he is with Cleopatra, he responds, "She does not own me. I am not married, Caesar. Let me hear." To prove his earnestness, he makes that alliance with Caesar and marries Octavia. And so he continues with a marriage to Octavia, showing that, at least in this venture, Antony is more devoted to politics than Cleopatra. It is not clear whether Antony intended from the start to give full fidelity to Octavia. It has been interpreted differently by many, but Enobarbus knows of a certainty that his friend and commander will not be faithful to this oath. When Maecenas mentions that Antony would now have to forget Cleopatra, as he is married to Octavia, Enobarbus with surety responds, "Never, he will not." Antony understands the same and convicts himself with the lines, "And though I make this marriage for my peace, in the east my pleasure lies." Antony pledges chastity to Octavia. "If I lose my honor, I lose myself." He insists to his new bride Octavia, but one vanishingly brief scene later, he is back in Alexandria with Cleopatra. If there is a lack of support for a relationship, it could be because of valid concerns or red flags that are easier to identify from an objective perspective. In the play, there is an astonishing lack of support for the relationship between Antony and Cleopatra. First of all, Caesar disapproves. The emperor is especially perturbed by Antony, preferring to confound such time that drums him from his sport, and speaks as loud in his own state as ours. Enobarbus, Antony's best friend, does not approve of the relationship either. He is vexed by the poor judgment and lack of leadership. He eventually has to distance himself from the situation, so far as to even ally himself with the enemy. Indeed, it is very telling that the first lines in the play tell how a soldier among Antony's ranks does not approve of the relationship. "Nay, but this dotage of our generals o'erflows the measure. Those his goodly eyes have glowed like plated Mars, now bend, now turn their office and devotion of their view upon a tawny front. His captain's heart, which in the scuffles of great fights hath burst the buckles on his breast, reneges all temper, and is become the bellows and the fan to cool a gypsy's lust." Shakespeare speaks through this soldier to represent the majority opinion of Antony and Cleopatra's relationship. Shakespeare has set the scene for the audience to recognize the negative effects of this relationship. Have you ever seen a couple when they are together? They seem to lose all capability for intelligent thought. Well, this destructive relationship absolutely causes a short in Antony's critical thinking skills. At the beginning of the play, Antony throws away all his cares in favor of his relationship by saying, "Let Rome and Tiber melt and fall." Later in the play, Caesar warns Antony, "Hey, I really love my sister. No brother did ever love a sister so dearly." Similar to the modern bro code that you don't date your best friend's sister. Now, if that can't be helped, at least don't hurt her. Well, Antony disregards both warnings, betrays the bro code, and doesn't even try to hide his infidelity to Octavia. When the inevitable fallout occurred, Antony made another terrible choice. He chose to battle on the sea where he knew Caesar was stronger and he was weaker. Polymaret's Cohen writes that Antony's men implore him not to fight by sea, but he refuses to listen because Cleopatra wants him to do it. These are emotional rationales, not strategic ones. Tina Packer writes, "By fighting at sea, Antony deserts his saner self because he knows he can beat Caesar on land. But Cleopatra wants to be in the battle, and she can only do so by sailing with her well-equipped navy. Antony lets her have her way." Antony's prowess on the battlefield is cataclysmically crippled. Even in history, Plutarch wrote about this event. So eager was he to spend the winter with her that he began the war before the proper time and managed everything confusedly. He was not master of his own faculties, but as if he were under the influence of certain drugs or magic rites, was ever looking eagerly toward her and thinking more of his speedy return than of conquering the enemy. The last item to discuss is that Antony gives the stupidest advice to Cleopatra while on his deathbed. This is extremely telling because usually deathbed dialogue in Shakespeare is revered and formidably foretelling. But Antony advises Cleopatra to trust no one but Procleus. Procleus turns out to be utterly untrustworthy and attempts to take advantage of Cleopatra and prey upon her. Even Shakespeare wants us to realize that Antony did not have a firm grip of reality and good judgment. The last characteristic I would like to discuss today is how Antony failed in his duties whenever the pair were together. Antony had a reputation of being an extraordinarily successful Roman soldier and conqueror. Until Cleopatra, that is. He is criticized by Philo in the first lines of the play for letting his love dictate his decisions and totally undermining his Roman virtues. It is even being regarded in Rome that Antony has given away all his military command to Cleopatra's eunuchs and her maids. Antony exposes his carelessness of his duties at the very beginning when he won't listen to Caesar's messengers. The people of Rome are tired of Antony's antics and believe he has traded a kingdom for his late-night large celebrations. Antony's soldiers whine and lament that Cleopatra is their true commander, not Antony. And together the pair make horrendous battle decisions. The collapse of Antony's duties amount to more than the lives of his soldiers, but also their trust in him, and they abandon him. It is said about Antony regarding these failings, "I never saw an action of such shame. Experience, manhood, honor, ne'er before did so violate itself." Identifying if a relationship is toxic or destructive can be challenging, as toxic behaviors can sometimes be subtle or disguised as normal or acceptable. However, Antony and Cleopatra's relationship is not one of these cases. It's very obvious. Engaging in a relationship that mirrors the characteristics demonstrated in this presentation today would be as dangerous as the viper who stole away the life of Cleopatra. If you find yourself in a toxic relationship, it is important to prioritize your well-being. Take steps to protect yourself by setting boundaries, seeking support, educate yourself about abusive behaviors, consider professional help, and develop